the IMF tool for supply and use tables. So be back in 15 minutes. From the coffee break. Well, so far in the first session, we had 3 very interesting presentations, mainly on the methods for compiling supply and use tables, the theoretical part, practices. And in the second part of this, first session, we will look at software. We will look at the IMF tool for balancing the supply and use tables and input-output tables. And Greg Legoff, who is senior economist at the IMF, will introduce the tool and help us forward. Greg, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Gerard. Thank you, everyone, for inviting us today. Good morning and good afternoon, good evening. I'm Gregory Legoff. I work at the IMF in the Real Sector Statistics Division. And the IMF provides technical assistance to its member countries. And in this context, we have developed a tool to help with the automatic balancing. This topic was mentioned by the previous presenters. So I'm going to briefly give a few guidelines on what the tool does and doesn't do. I share my. Can you see the screen?
Yeah, we can see your screen, Greg.
Okay. So I have a few slides to start with, and then I will show you the tool itself. It's in an Excel environment. This was developed by Michael Stanger, my colleague who works at the IMF. And we had a few versions since the first MATLAB version developed a few years ago. So as it was explained before, the automatic balancing comes after the manual balancing. So it's important to remember that this is not a substitute for manual balancing. The objective is when you have done all the manual balancing, which involves knowledge, expert knowledge from national accountants, analysis, you are left with small imbalances. By imbalances, I mean, basically in this context, supply being different from use. And therefore, you have to resolve these small imbalances using a software, a method. We've heard about the RAS before from the previous presenters. So basically, you're not going to balance $1. You're not going to balance 10 or even $1,000 or $10,000 manually, because it's too much work and it's below the level of accuracy of your national accounts. So you need a method to resolve these small imbalances. And basically, the method is not to put them in inventories as it happens sometimes, because again, putting the imbalances in any component of the supply and use tables defeats the purpose of compiling SUTs. So it's just a mathematical solution in this tool. It's based on constraint least square methods, and I will go through the various constraints that we have in the system. It's been used in all countries in the context of the technical assistance that we provide. We had several versions. The first version was the MATLAB version. May still be used. The latest one that I'm going to demonstrate today is Python. It doesn't make any difference visually. It's still an Excel environment, but the background software is different. So it's quite user-friendly. I will show you how to set up the tables and the system for your tables. It doesn't need specific classifications or structure. You will see that in a minute. And basically, we have 4 constraints. The basic one is supply has to equal use. So we have to define what is supply and what is use in your tables in the system. Then we have vertical constraints like SIP-FOB adjustment in imports or the sum of the margins columns being 0 because of the offset in the margin products. There's a third type of constraint, which is some coefficients which reflect the confidence you have in the data. So if you don't want to change specific cells in your tables, you can fix them and the system will not change them. And then the last set of constraints is more sophisticated. You can define some ratios or fixed totals. And I will show you how to do that. For example, you can force the supply and use tables to have a total margin column of 0. This is, again, when you look at the margin columns, you have an offset for the margin products. The total should be 0, and the system can work under that constraint. If you have confidence in your government final consumption expenditure, you can fix them, and the system will not change specific cells in your tables. And we've talked previously about some ratios, VAT ratios. You can also use the system to set the VAT to a specific ratio of, for example, household final consumption expenditure. I'm not talking about the allocation of VAT to the use side. I'm just talking about the VAT column in the supply and use tables, part of the price linkage. Again, I will show you this in a minute. Basically, the point is these constraints are in the system, which will balance the tables at the same time, and manually that would be extremely difficult, if not impossible, to maintain. You will see the various constraints we have, all these constraints at the same time while allocating imbalances on the, for example, on a proportional basis, like a RISE system. I'm not going to discuss the technical aspect of the installation. I believe the files have been made available online, so it's a free software. You can install it for free. If you have specific questions, you can send me an email. This is my email address. I think it may be also in the chat. Installation is not the last version of Python is quite straightforward, but if you have any issues, please feel free to contact me. Is the sound okay? Everybody can, because no, I don't have visual anymore, but I believe you can hear me well. This is the system as it looks like when you set up the supply and use tables and incorporate the balancing tool in your tables.
Greg?
Yeah.
You are still sharing the presentation in the editing mode. You have to stop sharing this one and to start the Excel separately. I'm sorry to interrupt.
No, that's good. It's good that you tell me. Can you see the spreadsheet?
Yeah, we can see the spreadsheet now, Greg.
Oh, okay, good, thanks. There's an instruction, like a short set of instructions available explaining what I'm going to tell you now and going through the detail of the various constraints, but I'm going to demonstrate how it works. you can refer to these instructions. They are available online. This is an example of supply and use tables. Your tables will not look like that. It's just an example of a structure that was developed to illustrate the functionalities of this tool. So I quickly describe these parts. It doesn't really matter, but just so you can follow the demonstration. Hopefully it's big enough. I can zoom a little bit, but then I will have to switch between the different tabs. So let's say that this is the structure. You have some products in the rows, and you have some columns here with, like in this case, the margins and taxes first. Then you have the production. In this example, the tables are split between market, non-market, and production for own final use. It doesn't matter if you don't have that structure, it works, and you will understand why, because I will show you how to set up the system to define the different components of the tables. So this is the supply here, the margins, taxes, and subsidies on products, market, non-market output, and some imports. Again, on the imports, there's a special column for the CFOB adjustments. You may not have this in your tables. It doesn't matter. If this column doesn't exist, you just have to define the system accordingly. And then on the use side, we have the intimate consumption with the same breakdown between market, non-market. And then we have the exports, final consumption, expenditure, capital formation. And as you can see in this example, the starting point is that the tables are not balanced. So we only discuss here the product balancing under the constraints that I'm going to define with you. You can see that supply and use are not the same. There's a small imbalance in each product. And basically, so an illustration of these imbalances is GDP by production and expenditure do not equal. And the result of the tool, the balancing tool, is displayed in this balanced version of the supply and use tables. This is how the system works. It's a function that becomes available in Excel once you install the tool. You have this function, SUTB. So it's not part of the standard Excel package. You need to, again, to install the tool to make it available. And then you define a number of constraints. And the result of the function is then giving you the solution derived by the tool to balance the tables. So basically, the system is making some adjustments, which we can see here. And stop me if I'm going too fast. I don't know how it looks on your screen. Sometimes with the connection, it's a bit, there's a delay in the display. So if that's a problem, let me know. I'm trying to go slowly. This is just, it's not really part of the tool, but you can add some additional tables. Here we just look at the changes made between the original tables unbalanced and the balanced table. So for example, it means that this cell was adjusted by reduced by was increased, I guess, because that's the final result, that's the original, by 5.5. So this is the starting point, is to define the different components in your supply and use tables so the system can read them and interpret the various components. So the first part is to define what supply is and what use is. The system works with ones and minus ones. Supply is one, basically. So as I said before, it doesn't matter if you have extra columns, it doesn't matter what the structure of your tables are. It doesn't matter how many products you have or how many industries. You just have to tell the system what supply is in your tables with ones. And then minus one refers to the use side, which reflects exactly the structure of your supply and use tables. So basically, practically, when you set up the system, you have to copy and paste the same table several times, and you include various information like this supply and use in the first constraint. The second constraint that you can use is to force some columns to add to 0. As you can see, the first column has these ones, and it means that this column would have to add up to 0. Why do we do that? Because this first column refers to the trade and transport margins. So the total should be 0 because there is an offset, and the offset is not properly set up. So the system will automatically adjust this column to force it to 0. And as you can see here, the sum of the trade and transport margins is 0. You can use the same approach for the CIF FOB column in your imports. Again, I think to illustrate the functionality, yeah, you can see that the unbalanced version doesn't add up to 0, while the balanced version is 0. So the CIF FOB adjustment is to reconcile the total CIF of imports, the total FOB of imports with the detailed CIF. Well, the system can also make sure that this is the case. So you can use this second constraint to force some columns to add to 0, like for margins and the CIF FOB adjustment. Where do these constraints go? It's just in the formula that we are using here in the balanced version. I don't want to click on it because it may slow down the recalculate everything. It's not because of the connection. I'm just worried that I will try later if you want, but until I show you all the constraints, I'm not going to recalculate the balance tables. But basically, we are incorporating the constraints in the formula. As you can see, the first part is the unbalanced SUTs, and then we use the constraints that I was just talking about, what is supply and what is use, and the total 0 columns in this part of the formula of the SUTB function. So these are called like basic constraints. We now go to more complicated options. Based on the quality of the data, the source data that you have, you can prevent some cells to be modified by the balancing, the automatic balancing tool. And you can even set up some robustness coefficients, which will tell the system how much these cells can be adjusted. So they are percentages, but in fact, it doesn't mean that we don't only adjust they can only adjust the corresponding percentage, just an indicator between 0 and 100. So, for example, here we have 100% here for government final consumption expenditure, which means that the system is not going to change this particular item. It can be any cell, and I will, after I finish with the first overview, I will make some calculations to show so here we don't want to change what's called collective the collective column in the final consumption expenditure for the government. It means that we shouldn't see any change in that particular column. Well, it's a bit hard to see, but that's the column. Yeah, so this is the adjustments made by the system. It shows the difference between the unbalanced and the balanced tables, and you can see item in that column doesn't show any difference. It means that the system didn't change anything. For example, this 150.1 is still identical in the balanced version of the tables. So you can decide for any cell, any part of your tables to define the coefficient to inform the system about what can be changed and what cannot. So typically, intermediate consumption more likely to be adjusted than exports or imports, for example, because we usually have more confidence in the imports and exports data compared to the detailed intermediate consumption. So this is the third constraint that the system can handle. And the fourth one, is optional, but it can help you define some totals, for example. So here we want to make sure that the total of import services will be 451. Okay, so in that last set of constraints, you have to put one for the columns which you want to add up to this total in that last cell on the top right. This is one possible use of this additional constraint. So you can decide to have a total of imports of 451, 500, and then the system will incorporate that in the balancing. Another use of this is to define ratios. So here we want to define a margin. So again, in the context of this balancing, we are not producing input-output tables and use at basic price. I'm just talking about the price linkage or the total margin for, in this example, manufacturing. We want to make sure that this margin is going to be 12% of some data here, which are referring to the final consumption expenditure. So you can do that, and I show you the results in the balance tables. It means that you can, in the first case, you can define column constraints. I'm going to zoom out so you can see maybe better. So we have column constraints. We can also have row constraints with some ratios that you can use. Why is it negative here? It's just because the use is coded as negative in the system. We were talking about the VAT. Oh no, that's the input-output ratio. You can fix a ratio between input and output. So if you want to fix the ratio of, so this column is manufacturing, you want to make sure that there's a fixed input of manufacturing and output of manufacturing. In this case, 61%. You can do that too. Same as total imports, you can fix total exports or any column. Here we say that we want the total export, which should be these two columns here, goods and services. Yeah, we want the total exports to be 555. So the system will incorporate these constraints. This constraint also, you can fix basically any column. An example of fixed ratios for VAT, you could, is it VAT? Yeah, a tax, it's not VAT specific, but let's say you want a tax to be 18% of final consumption. You can write a raw constraint like here, and you define 18% here, and that it means that the corresponding tax in this column will be 18% of the sum of these items, which are identified here with the minus 0.18. Again, why is it minus? It's just because the system is negative for use components. So I can show you the results of these constraints in the system and modify a few if you want to see what happens. So first of all, we have here this is the balanced table here that I'm showing you. So basically, this is the result of the balancing, automatic balancing from the tool. So if I want to change, just to show you an example, total imports, which at the moment is 451, I can go in the last constraint and say, I don't want it to be 451 anymore. I want it to be 455. So it's taking a bit of time here. It should be calculated. So you see now it has made some adjustments to have a total import of 455. So if I go back, it was, I mean, believe me, it was 451 as you saw before. Basically, you can change the other constraints in this table to incorporate more constraints, more information. You cannot combine. You have to set up a new constraint for every new role, I would say. So the question might be, how many can we have? The answer is, I don't know, because I don't think we've reached the point where they could not be processed. But I guess there's a maximum. There would be a maximum with Excel, but that's probably used to be 65,000 rows. So I mean, probably not going to reach that point. It goes pretty fast, so there shouldn't be an issue. But the point is, every time you add a new constraint, you need to incorporate a new table here, which you copy and paste, obviously, and you set up your constraint. So now the function here is this one. That function becomes available when you when you install the package, which again should be available online, and these are the different constraints that I've just explained. So you first have to define in your function the original unbalanced table, which is this range, C9 to AU22. And then you define the rest following the same logic. For the last constraint, the additional constraint, which is a bit more complex, you have to incorporate the total, the very last column, which shows total imports or total exports, for example. This is explained in the manual, basically, to make sure that you incorporate this column. Okay, so now it's recalculating. So if you want to, I can quickly demonstrate that if you don't want to change specific columns, you can use the robustness coefficient. So you can see here there was an adjustment on the third row in the first column. This is on this is trade and transport margin. So if we want this to prevent this from happening, we could go in the robustness coefficient and change this to 100. So before I do the calculation, you can see here there was an adjustment of minus 5.1. If I don't want this cell to be changed, to be adjusted, I have to put 100 here. And now we see 0. So it means this cell has not been adjusted because we have told the system not to adjust it. So of course, if you put 100 everywhere, it means the system cannot adjust anything and it won't work. It will remain unbalanced. The more you prevent the system from making adjustments on some cells, the more it will adjust other cells to make it work. So let's say that you only allow 2 cells in the whole tables to be adjusted. I mean, it's probably not going to work anyway, but they would have these cells which are not adjusted will have this will impact on the others. So some cells would be we'd see large adjustments made. This is that's a quick overview. Let me reverse this. Okay. So typically, these coefficients here would be based on your knowledge of the data, the quality of the data, and you can guide the system to adjust some parts of the tables and not others. In the additional constraints, you can also use some more complex combinations of coefficients to derive a solution for informal economy. Let's say that you have your standard SUTs and you want to derive an estimate of the some informal transactions. You can combine these to match a total that you have, let's say, in construction. So let's say there's a large component of your construction industry and product which you think is informal. You can split. Again, that would be a modal solution, but you can put some coefficients to guide the system through modal solution of the informal part of specific products or activities. Same for digital activities. I say this because that was a question that we had recently. So that you can extend these simple examples to more complex modeling. Then, because it's in Excel, you can add any additional quality indicators. So here we've calculated the adjustments, also the contributions to GDP. You can add as many things as you want, because the system is working on this this table here, the balanced version. The rest is just additional features that we've added manually to help understanding what's going on. Depending on your version of Excel, you may have to copy and paste the formula across to make it work. Again, this is explained in the manual that we provide. In my version of Excel, if I just type the first cell on the top left, and then the system and Excel knows that it has to copy and paste in the whole area here. If it's not the case, then you have to do it manually. Basically, it's Control Shift Enter. Is there anything specific that you would like me to demonstrate using the example? Like if you have a specific question, I can make some changes in the constraints to show you some specific features. All the constraints that I have explained, like in this example, are shown here. So I mentioned the 12% of the margin that I wanted for manufacturing, where this is what the system does. So in this cell, this is the margin corresponding to this column for manufacturing, and this is the value that I want to constrain the margin to. So that's final consumption expenditure for manufacturing. So as you can see, the system is calculating a solution where that margin is exactly 12% as defined. Sorry, if I'm going too fast, let me know. The 12% is defined in one of these constraints in the additional. You see the 12% here. This is what defines the ratio of 12% of the margin to the final consumption expenditure of manufacturing here. So you can check the same for the tax rate. It's exactly 18%. So if I change it, well, that may take some time. So I won't do it now. But if I wanted to change that 12% of that 18%, I just have to go here and change that number, basically. Of course, if you put impossible constraints, like if you say, if you have an imbalance in the, let's say that this total column does not add up to 0. So it has to be, but if you set up the system here and say, I don't want to change that column, well, it's not going to work, because if you tell the system to have a total margin of 0, total margin column of 0, and you prevent the system from making any adjustment in that column, well, it's not going to change it, so the column will not add to 0. So you have to, there may be some conflicts between your constraints. You have to think about that. It has to be consistent to work. We used to have some little technical issues before, like you couldn't have an empty product. I mean, this has been solved. The system has improved, so now it should work. As I said, it's very flexible because you don't need predefined classification. You don't have to. You don't need to use any specific product or industry classification. You just have to define the use and the supply in your tables, it's pretty flexible. You work in an Excel environment. Unlike the system that my colleague Achille will demonstrate tomorrow, which is the tool to convert SUTs into IoTs, where you can see all the formula and the calculation. Here you can't. So it's only the solution that you can see. If you want to understand what it does and look at the programming, you basically have to look at the code. You only see the result here. Is there any specific feature that you would like me to show you before we?
Okay, correct. Let's see if there are any questions. First of all, thanks for demonstrating the tool to us. Seems very useful in balancing the supply and use tables. I'm not that technical, but I think even I could manage using the tool. So as I understood, you predefine your supply and use table, the unbalanced one. You give the constraints you want to apply in the solution, and then the system automatically calculates a new supply and use table, which is completely balanced. So that sounds like a very useful tool. But let's see, I can imagine that, well, we gave a lot of information to the participants, that there are some questions. And please make questions about the basic features of the system. If you have questions about how to install, if you face technical issues installing, for that you can use the, you can send Greg a mail, or you send the UNECE an email, and the mails have been, put in the chat before Greg started his demonstration. But let's also turn to Sanjeev. Sanjeev.
Thanks, Gerard. Yeah, I think it's a really good demonstration there, Greg. I think that I agree with Gerard. There's a lot covered, and for many people who are practitioners, they want to get their hands dirty. That's always a good way of learning. So allowing for that, there are a couple of things coming through the chat. I just want to pick up whilst they evolve. I think this is really interesting about the automated tool. I think all countries will need it. I think your emphasis on dealing with small imbalances is very important. I think the element of the expansion of the industries is very important. Can I just check for flexibility? If you wanted to increase an industry, let's say, for example, in the non-market output category, is that reasonably easy to do? Are there instructions, and is the system flexible? The second question I've got for you is, you talked about the supply and use of the products. Does the balancing go towards changing the primary inputs, the GVA part? So obviously, if you change the output, you'll change intermediate, but then you change the relationship between intermediate and value added. So the question there is there an impact on balancing in terms of GVA and its components? On the third question, the coefficients, the range, I assume you can have a coefficient, a quality coefficient that's different for every cell. So just a clarification on that. I think the way you've set it up, it looks like it is, but I just want to get that confirmed. And then in terms of the time series, is there a time series dynamic, or is this a balancing tool that works for 1 year or one period, supply and use table? Is there a time series that then monitors the impact of the balance picture on growth rates, for example? And my final comment is, how quick, in terms of speed, when you put your parameters in, does this come up with a new balance? So obviously, the more parameters, maybe the longer and the harder it is to find a statistical solution, or find one. But just an idea of roughly Are we talking seconds, minutes, hours? Preferably not days or weeks. Others we might have to go back to manual balancing. But there's 5 there for you for quick comment. Now I'll now read. I'll let you get on with those, and there are comments now coming in the chat just to keep you informed, and I'll come back. So off to you, Greg.
Okay, I wanted to start my video, but apparently I can't. So sorry, you may not be able to see me. I stopped sharing. So expanding the SUTs. Oh, now I can. Okay. Basically, if so your question, Sanjeev, is you want to, after you set up the system, you add a new industry or you want to add a new product. I haven't tried that. I guess because we work in an Excel environment, if you insert a new column or insert a new product, I would think that the formula would be automatically updated, as it often is the case in Excel. You know, when you add an extra column, it will consider that this is in the range. However, to set up the formula, it's a matter of minutes. Once you have the constraints defined in the system, you just have to select the area of your tables and type the formula equal SUTB, and then define with the mouse the area for the unbalanced and all the constraints. So it's very quick. But I don't even think you would have to do that, because my guess is that Excel will automatically incorporate the new columns or the new rows automatically in the result. However, to make it work, all the tables, the different parts of the system, so the unbalanced, the balanced, and all the constraints, they have to be consistent. They need to have the same number of rows and columns. Otherwise, it doesn't make sense, because so you see what I mean. The balanced table has to be the same size as the unbalanced table. But I would guess there's no need to retype the formula. But even if you had to, it's once you know the system, it's very fast. The GVA part. So the system that I showed is only doing the basically supply and use balancing. So it's not, we haven't worked on primary input components. So I haven't thought about it, but there may be a way with the constraints to fix the value added. So I don't think we haven't thought about incorporating the compensation of employees and all these primary input components in the balancing tool. But you could probably, I would have to think about how to do that, fix the value added by working on the intermediate consumption and output to make sure that the system is not going to change value added. But I have to admit, the question never came up so far, so we haven't tried that. We try to keep it simple. So there are probably a lot of things we could do, but the advantage is the flexibility and simplicity. The quality coefficients question, yes, we can define cell by cell a specific coefficient. It doesn't have to be the whole column or the whole row. It can be any cell. So if you want to fix the production of one particular industry for one particular product, you can do that, and the system will not change it. It doesn't work on time series. I mean, there's no specific feature. It's only just a set of supply and use tables. And I can't even read my own writing. Oh yeah, how fast? So it's a matter of seconds. So let me, I can show you, but with this kind of the size of the table I was showing you, and because of the network, I think it's a bit slower, but when I work on my computer, it's seconds. Once I worked in Mongolia on supply and use tables where they had hundreds of products and industries. I don't remember exactly, but it may have been 300-400, and it would take a few minutes, I would say less than 5. I don't remember exactly, but it was not instantaneous like it is with a small table like I was showing you.
No, that's
It
fine.
hasn't been an issue so far. Yeah.
Yeah, just to say, I mean, for the attendees, for their benefit as well, I mean, I think the speed is very important. You said seconds and minutes, not weeks or days, etc. So it's very important. So that's a very, very important aspect. Another one I think is very important is the fact that you've got the element of it's in Excel and you can expand those industries. That will give flexibility because obviously not all the countries have the same number of products and or industries. So that's another good aspect. The GVA, that's an expansion thing. I'm not concerned about that. It'd be important if you can do that. The time series will be important. And I suppose in a way, the current price and the volume or previous year price. So there's work for you, Greg, for pursuit for the development of this tool. But you're right. In a sense, keeping the tool simple does make it quite effective for the purpose it's doing. And I think the element of the industry expansion links to a point that Nori Yamano's made in the chat about can you expand those coefficients to 2 to 3 digit level. So I think in a sense you explain that you can increase the industries, but what happens if you keep the industries at the 2 digit and then shift that to the 3 digit? Does that mean all the coefficient flexibility is there as well for you?
Yeah, so any change you make, you would have to inform the system about these the new parameters for these additional cells. So if you add new industry or new product, you would have to inform the system about the quality of these extra cells. You can just copy paste what you have above or next. But if you want to do a more accurate job, you want to go back to your system and make these changes. But so the starting point is not the starting point. Usually is when I provide technical assistance, we start from the country SUTs. So we did an example with Georgia. They sent me their tables. And I just set up the system for them. I start from their tables and I copy the same template again and again and again. And I use these extra tables to document the constraints. So basically you don't start from the SUTs from another country or so I don't think that situation of adding industries or columns would be very frequent unless you want in your own classification to add new products or new industries or reduce. So you can also collapse. But then, yes, you would have to make manual changes and then document the coefficients and other things. You would have to, again, if you had a column, inform the system if it's supply or if it's use, and all the additional constraints would have to be consistent with the new classification.
Okay, that's good. Just following up a slightly different variation, but in a very important variation, is Nori's second point. Obviously, it's really useful that you've got constraints that you can put in by cell. And if you've got information on the source data and the quality of that data and they're informed on that basis, that's excellent. But what about in the balancing process? Do you have like flexibility of ranges of those coefficients that the balancing process can work within? So for example, we know there's VAT rates and we know there are effective rates, but is there having a fixed VAT rate is fine. But when you're balancing, that's implicitly going to change. Do you have the flexibility of a tolerance of, let's say, you say 95%, but plus or minus 2%, for example? Is there, because obviously on VAT, on some of the other areas like margins and value added to intermediate or value added to output, you might want a bit of flexibility. Is that feasible?
Well, I'm not a programmer, so I don't know if it's feasible, but it's not in the system at the moment. So if you say, I want this to be, this VAT number to be 18% of that figure in final consumption, it will give you the exact number. So you can't say I want it to be that percentage unless there's another constraint somewhere else. Then I would allow a few deviations from that rule. We can't do that. It's a hard rule that doesn't allow some flexibility.
Yeah, I mean, I think for the attendees, what I would say is for some variables, a tolerance will be welcome. For some variables, you don't. Because say, for example, you balance the supply and use of the products, you could end up, if you don't have the parameters set wisely, a situation where the standard rate of VAT, the implied rate, is actually greater than the actual rate, which would make no sense. But statistically, it's balanced. So this is part of my point I made very early on about plausibility tests. We can have a statistical balance, but we then need the human input to evaluate that balance. Is it economically sensible and plausible in the real world? And an example would be, have you got on the balanced position a VAT rate that's greater than the actual rate? But that would make no sense. So this is for the audience more so than for yourself, Greg. So these sort of issues are very important. I've got one final question in the written chat. If anyone else wants to, by all means, we've got a little bit of time. So if you were going to estimate for the informal sector in construction, how would you do that? Because in a sense, you've got construction industry and some informal activity would already be in there. But what about if you were expanding it to, for example, beyond the existing production boundary? Or can you show the informal component of that industry separately? So it's linked to the expansion of the industry.
Yeah,
product.
Exactly. Yeah, it's exactly that. You can, let's say, expand some products or industries into informal products, and you can define subtotals. So you could say, I will add 3 products for, or let's say I would add 2 products for construction. I will have the formal and the informal part. I know the total. I don't want to change it, and I will control that with the additional constraints in the system that I showed, when you can control some column totals, or so you can control the total, and you can set some coefficients to indicate the system, the proportions between formal, informal, by row and by columns. So, and then the system will make some changes, which again, you can guide with the robustness coefficients, but it will make some changes within the constraints that you have defined. So it will model a solution on informal components, and that would be a solution model from the standard SUTs that you can derive or model with assistance from the system. Did I answer your question, or is it?
I think linking it to the expansion of the industry column gives you the flexibility. I know there's been 1, 2, 3 comments in, I'm guessing, Russian. I'm just going to wait a few moments if that gets translated into English into a question or a comment. But whilst that happens, I think it's also worth commenting for the attendees. What Greg's described in his presentation is in line with some of the comments I made earlier on. It's limited, it's controlled, it's managed, which gives you a handle as a producer to do so much work with the compilation, then the manual balancing or investigations, before you get to the small items left that the human could do, but an automated process would save time. But the key emphasis is the human must have criteria and an evaluation of those post-balanced results. And that balance, there's no right answer. It may be different in different areas because of the imbalances that you started with, or have a different effect in different economies. I think the comment was no translation into Russian. Okay, so in the meantime, so I would say there's a clear role for automated balancing tools. This is an example. There are many others like GRAS, KRAS, lots of more sophisticated. But actually, a lot of the sophisticated tools, I would emphasize, are used much more by analysts and economists, researchers, modelers. We need to be careful what we're doing in the production environment as official statistical producers. So we need a tool to complement what we're doing, but at the end of the day, we have to explain what those final statistics are, whether they come out of a balancing process or it's the raw data that's come straight through. Otherwise, I can't see any further questions. So I'll hand back to yourself, Gerard, and maybe Greg, if you've got any final comments. Thanks.
No, so that's good to hear your feedback. Maybe additional features. We wanted to keep it simple again, so that's why it's in Excel. Our experience when we use more sophisticated tools, again, the IMF provides technical assistance to statistical offices which are less advanced probably than most of the countries in this audience. So we want something that they can use, which doesn't require too much training, because sometimes in small offices, there's a high staff turnover. So new people need to be able to use it without too much time learning about complex, features. It has to be with minimum maintenance also. So there's no need for someone to come and fix the problem. So that's why it is in Excel, and it's quite simple. But of course, yeah, there are some limitations which maybe we could work on, at least for, like, example, you said, Sanjeev, with the tolerance on ratios. Maybe that's an idea that we could explore.
Yeah, my only caveat there would be, Greg, the more clever, the more sophisticated, the more you put into the scope of the tool, you will then move from seconds and minutes to days and weeks. So there's a balance to be struck, because there's obviously different dimensions. You could have the time series dimension. You could have the basic price and purchaser price balancing together dimension, the current price and in previous year price dimension. So there are various aspects that you could consider, quarterly, annual. What I'm saying is, where you are, I agree with you, the tool is simple, it's effective, it does what it says on the tin. If people want something more sophisticated, then there'll be a price that they pay, and quite often it's the complexity, the size, and the speed of the tool. So yeah, as long as people know what they can do with this, is great.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Greg and Sanjeev.
There's a hand come up.
Tihomira.
Mira.
I think it's about the Russian translation. Tihomira.
No, the Russian translation, we apologized. It was restored about 5 minutes ago. We missed maybe for 5 minutes. We apologize for that. I just wanted to add something. I don't see now many questions from participants in the chat, but the request for such a tool that is more simple to use, that is for free and could be used in many offices, have been raised many times in the past, when we already had one workshop and another special session on supply and use. So I hope that really responds to the needs, especially of these countries from the region here, the EC countries. Maybe you don't have the questions yet. You need to try it. Just to say that again, to repeat, the tool is on the website of the meeting, and the installation instructions and the manual are also translated into Russian. So we will have another session tomorrow. You can also come back with questions to Greg, or you can write to us. And one thing maybe we could hear now or tomorrow, or that would be interesting for me, is from colleagues of Georgia. Georgia have shown that they have some system already implemented for balancing, also in Excel. And I know that there was test of that tool also on Georgia data. If they would like to provide any feedback or any experience on that, would be interesting to hear. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Tihomira. I see Maka coming online, so Maka.
For tomorrow, we are going to show our main principle of converting SUT in input-output tables using Excel spreadsheets. Because for our practice, we have developed syntax in our software, and it is not useful for presentations. That's why we are going to show an example in Excel spreadsheets.
Thank you, Marka, for the clarification. Okay, with that and no further questions, I think I'm going to really thank Greg for his demonstration of the tool. Like Sanjeev concluded, it's a simple but quite effective tool to be used in the balancing of the supply and use tables. Can be applied in many cases in many countries. We of course realize that participants now have been given a lot of information about the tool. And I think, well, the proof of the pudding is in the eating. So please start, playing with the tool, start using it, make your own small supply and use table, see how it works and how it probably may fit your own work process in the statistical office. In that way, I always find that's the best way to learn and to see how the tool can and, probably can be incorporated in production procedures. So Greg is available for any technical questions, of course. If you have problems with installation, you can contact Greg, but I think Greg, you're also available if you encounter other difficult issues with using the tool. People are more than free to ask you or your colleagues at the RMF a question, and the same holds for the colleagues at the UNEC, which are also available for questions. And I think with that, we close this first session of the special session of the first 3 days. Tomorrow we will continue. Then we start at 12:30 sharp. As today, the meeting will be open, I think, 1 hour before. So if you want to test your connection, etc., the meeting is open. So please use that if you want to. Sanjeev will chair tomorrow's meeting. Like Tifomira said, I have a different another engagement tomorrow, so unfortunately will not be able to attend, but I will be back on Wednesday. And finally, I think I have to check Tifomira if she has any further announcements before I officially close the first day.
Yes, so thank you, Gerard. No new announcements from us. Just to warn participants, tomorrow the session will be a little bit longer. We'll continue to 4 p.m. Geneva time, depending where you are. And as we said earlier, we also expect any new questions or comments you may have on the tool presented by Greg. Thank you. See you tomorrow.
Okay. Thank you, Tifomira. So thanks all for...
Thank you very much, Gerald, for today's session.
You're welcome. So thanks all for participating in this special session. Also special thanks to Lydia, Marka, Sanjeev and Greg for the presentations they have just given to us. And wishing you all a good day, rest of the day, and see you tomorrow, and bye.